Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. Friday's edition of Alaska Weather, 6th day of August, 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show. First, we've got, I believe, not that. There, let's see. Okay. I am on the wrong screen. There we go. There we are. Fire danger. We've got still high to very high fire danger along the upper Yukon River there, Yukon Flats, Porcupine River, and then southward from the southern slopes of the Eastern Brooks Range all the way down to the North Waitok area, Chicken, those areas across Eagle, down to the north slope of the Eastern Alaska Range. Too much rain, Central Tanana Valley around Fairbanks today in areas there from about Delta Junction westward. So no fire danger in those areas. And moving on to the hazardous weather graphics, there are no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere in the state, at least through tonight, probably tomorrow, hopefully through the weekend, as no big storms expected. And from there, we'll go to satellite imagery, and you can see a band of clouds there signifying a front. Temperatures contrasted from north to south. Strong north winds and northeast winds blowing through the central and western Alaska Range, as high as 55 miles an hour peak gusts at Howard Pass in the western Brooks Range there. And let's see, Point Hope, northeast gusts 47 miles an hour. Noatak had gusts 45 miles an hour. And then the central western Brooks Range, afternoon temperatures at about the 2,000 to 3,000 foot elevation were near or just above freezing, or right at 32, 33 degrees. Along with those winds, pretty chilly August afternoon up that way. And temperatures upper 30s to near 40 for the north slope at mid-afternoon, as well as the Arctic coast with a lot less wind there. Otherwise, south of that area, it was a pretty wet day around the interior areas with, let's see, as I mentioned, Chattanooga, half an inch of precipitation today. Coldfoot at about 3/10 of an inch. And Galena, about a quarter of an inch there, so quite an area precipitation there. And then another band with a trough kind of coming down the east side of a ridge of high pressure over Bristol Bay and building along the southwest coast. That brought some light rain into the, about a third of an inch fell at Pedro Bay there at Iliamna Lake. Otherwise, amounts were lighter, say 500s of king salmon. And a few clouds starting to drift into Kodiak Island. Mostly cloudy with early day showers or heavy, thick dew, northern Cook Inlet, Anchorage, up in toward Eureka. Although that was actually some rainfall in Eureka. They had 1,500ths of an inch in the last 12 hours. Otherwise, amounts from 1 to 500. So that was about it. And 70s over portions of the Copper River Basin today. Copper Center had 75 degrees. Up in the eastern interior, we had, actually over the Kenai, around Kenai Lake, Kenai Peninsula was into the lower 70s there. Broadview and the Kenai Lake area there. And Northway also into the lower 70, about 77 at Northway was one of the warmer spots in the state today. Otherwise, you can see the area of clouds with heaviest rain over the northern panhandle today. It looks like it's drifting from east to west there from Canada. Latuya Bay picked up 9/10 of an inch of precipitation today, while let's see, 4/10 of an inch fell at Haines and about a third of an inch at Juneau. By contrast, lighter amounts, about 500s at Wrangell, and then the net did pick up, I believe, 3/10 of an inch of precipitation. Those, again, all 12-hour amounts. And on the satellite image, you can see a little pressure there with that front kind of breaking away from the main low centers that pushes to the Alaska Peninsula today. That did have some pretty gusty winds with it, as high as, 52 miles per hour peak wind gust at Nikolsky. During the day today, Cold Bay had gusts up to about 30 miles an hour, but the strongest winds were over the eastern Aleutians, just ahead of that frontal system. Otherwise, note the clearing over Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula there, as well as in the Gulf of Alaska, a fair amount of clearing, and up along the northwest coast, Noatak Valley area. Point Hope, some clearing skies there with that offshore flow, but then it picks moisture up. Some light precipitation in toward Kotzebue, not a whole heck, nothing too terribly heavy there, but pretty light, heavier over toward the central interior and the upper Tanana Valley area. Also some showers along the western Alaska Range, and then the moderate amounts of rain there over the eastern North Gulf Coast from about Yakutat. We're at 3/4 of an inch into the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area. Forecast for tonight, we've got rain up over the northern interior, more rain for the Alaska Peninsula, diminishing rain over the Panhandle, as well as diminishing winds in the western Brooks Range. That'll continue through tomorrow, milder temperatures as well as a cold pool shifts off to the Mackenzie River Delta and Northwest Territories. Cool and showery over the interior right through Sunday. Drier from the Yukon, north of the Yukon River. Mostly cloudy north of the Brooks Range, partly to mostly with low clouds and fog along the Arctic coast. More rain slips into the central Aleutians. Another round of moderate rain for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Lows tonight, lower 30s, 30, 35, North Slope, Arctic coast, right up to the Brooks Range, but south of the Brooks Range, mid 40s, lower to mid 50s, Tanana Valley, 40s, west southwest interior, 50 to 55, southern Alaska, in the 50s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow. Pushing back up towards 70 or into the lower 70s again, near 70 Kenai Peninsula, and lower 70s up eastern Tanana Valley, Northway and Tok, lower to mid 60s in the central interior, and 40 to 45 or 40 to 50 for the North Slope Arctic coastal areas, lower to mid 60s for the Panhandle. Lows, again, back down into the 30s, North Slope Arctic coast into the Brooks Range, 40s to lower 50s, interior, lower 50s south central Alaska, and in the 50s for the Panhandle and the Aleutians. Highs 60 to 70 for the Panhandle and 60 to 70 central eastern interior, 45 to 55 for the North Slope, mid 50s in the Bering Sea.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather for Saturday morning. IFR central eastern Arctic coast, marginal for the Brooks Range there, except narrow band there coming across the central area into the Koyukuk Valley IFR, part of the Yukon Valley IFR, and on out Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, all of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, IFR, Alaska Peninsula, western Alaska Peninsula there, IFR, Kodiak Island, VFR, some marginal VFR on the southwest coast, VFR, Kamishak Bay, Iliamna, into the southwest interior areas, and IFR for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Northern Cook Inlet, Susitna, Manuska Valley, up into the eastern interior. For the afternoon, there we go, Saturday afternoon, IFR holds right along the central eastern Arctic coast, VFR breaking out over the North Slope into the Yukon Flats there, Porcupine River zone, eastern Brooks Range, IFR holding Kobuk, Selawik Valleys, and central northern Seward Peninsula up to Kotzebue. Marginal VFR Kivalina, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, Point Lay, VFR. IFR, Bering Sea, Aleutians, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, Course Pribilof. So a little bit of improvement for the western Alaska Peninsula, but not much, still marginal. Kodiak Island deteriorating to IFR throughout the day. Fognak Island marginal. Cook Inlet, marginal VFR up into the central interior, possibly northern Cook Inlet, Susitna, Manuska Valley becoming VFR into the northern Copper River Basin to Northway and Tok, but some IFR there holding over the looks like Chena area, White Mountains down in toward Fairbanks, Eielson, North Pole area, some IFR through the afternoon. VFR for the Panhandle. And for Sunday morning, marginal VFR southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, Southern Cook Inlet there, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, IFR. Bering Sea, generally IFR right up to the southwest coast. Aleutians IFR, Alaska Peninsula IFR with some marginal VFR. Arctic Coast IFR. Part of the North Slope, Brooks Range into the Koyukuk, Yukon Flats area, Noatak Valley, VFR. Southern Seward Peninsula, VFR. And for the afternoon, good VFR there, Seward Peninsula, Northwest Coast, Kobuk, Koyukuk Valleys, eastward to the Yukon Flats, Southern Brooks Range, IFR, Arctic Coast, and a little inland there into the North Slope a ways. IFR, Susitna, Manuska Valley, Northern Cook Inlet to just south of Kenai or so, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, Central Panhandle, marginal to the south, VFR for Lynn Canal Glacier Bay. Still pretty socked in for the Aleutians, Bering Sea, right up to the Bering Strait. And for passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, both mostly marginal tomorrow throughout the day. And for Saturday, Lake Clark and Merrill starting out IFR, gradual improvement hopefully to marginal VFR during the afternoon toward evening. Same trend for rainy and windy. Same trend also. Lowest conditions early on, a little better, probably hopefully reaching VFR, but probably not. Isabel, same thing, IFR to marginal VFR, and Mentasta, marginal VFR to VFR, a little better over that way. And for Tanita, call it lowest conditions in the morning, better in the afternoon. IFR to VFR, Portage, IFR to marginal VFR, and Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR to VFR. Freezing levels, cold pool aloft, that cold air mass with the upper low shifting eastward with the upper low right over the northwest Canada there, Mackenzie Bay area, and 2 to 10,000 feet right around Eagle, Panhandle 8,000 feet southern southeast coast, and upper low pressure off the Yukon Delta coast, northern Bering Sea, 4,000 feet there. Otherwise, quite a gradient across the Alaska Peninsula. Icing, 2 zones of mostly rime here, from Kodiak Island into the southwest interior Alaska Peninsula, southern Bering Sea, and in the northern area, mostly mixed, isolated, moderate in both those areas. Jet stream, strongest jet just south of the Aleutians up to 130 knots, kind of takes a turn to the northeast, dropping off 55 to 80 knots, 9,000 feet, about the same pattern, 30 to 35 knots there, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, 45 for the eastern Aleutians, and for 3,000 feet, 35 knot easterlies north of that low center, 50 knot westerlies across the Fox Islands, translates into moderate chop there. Surface to 5,000 feet, lee side of the Alaska Peninsula, Unmac on Alaska Island, light to isolated moderate chop up across Bristol Bay and Cape Lisburne and Point Hope.
Some places on the surface you might have these steep cracks and giant fissures that you would have to be careful not to fall into. In other places you might see towers of ice right next to places that were relatively smooth. You might see places that were dark. Ice there takes the form of rock. It's frozen solid until you dig down into that ocean. So you may see some things that look similar to Earth, but you may see some things that are very different.
That voice you just heard?
I am Morgan Kramer, NASA scientist.
I love it.
That's Morgan. She's probably one of NASA's best spokespeople for exploring our solar system's icy moons.
Europa is a fascinating place. It has this liquid water ocean that's about 3 times the volume of all of Earth's oceans combined. That's a lot of water.
To understand what makes Earth so special, sometimes you need to back up and take in the big picture. Remember, the cryosphere is every place on Earth with frozen water. And water is one of the biggest indicators for life.
Every place, at least so far, that we have found life, we found water along with it.
And so far, Earth is the only planet we know of with life. Although Europa isn't the only icy moon in our solar system, NASA has identified it as one of those places with key astrobiological potential. Morgan is a collaborator on the Mapping Imaging Spectrometer for Europa, an instrument selected for NASA's next mission to Jupiter's icy moon Europa. But she's also more than just a scientist working in a laboratory. She's preparing future NASA missions for success on the surface of alien worlds. This year, Morgan and her colleagues were in the field studying how life colonizes in fresh lava.
Earth, it turns out, has a lot of excellent, what we call analog environments, places that are similar enough to some of these other worlds that we can conduct some tests and we can do some analyses here. Now, they're not perfect, of course. They're not going to be exactly like Europa, but we can still learn a lot by testing in these environments. Some of these places include Antarctica and the Arctic Circle, but there are other places too, Alaska, Greenland, even Iceland. Any place where you have a lot of ice, because guess what the surface of Europa is made of? A lot of ice.
Studying the cryosphere doesn't just have big implications for Earth. It also matters for the frozen worlds in our own cosmic backyard.
If we're able to find life or evidence of past life on a place like Europa, that tells us that not only can life happen in other places, but it's common enough that it happened at least twice in the same tiny solar system. That means that the universe is wide open in terms of how much life we might find, the types of life we might find. It would revolutionize how we see ourselves and the possibilities for contact in the universe. It would be amazing. Oh, it's so exciting.
As it flows down the valleys, it actually carves those valleys out and it makes them deeper. So it creates these beautiful fjords where the ice flows down, snakes out down to the ocean or to the lakes or further inland. And so that ice is flowing, it's moving. My interest in glaciers comes from the sheer size of these things and how much they're able to change on human timescales. And so the amount of mass and energy being transferred by glaciers around the globe is tremendous. It's an absolutely fascinating thing to study from space.
Mountain glaciers are some of the most charismatic parts of the cryosphere. Some might cling to the edges of cliffs at higher elevations, then lay bare and flat in a broad plain, looking cracked and weathered like elephant skin, before tumbling thousands of feet toward the sea and terminating in a dramatic calving front. They're like motion frozen in time, until they aren't. They tell a story about the distant past and yet are incredibly responsive to the present. You can understand why they'd be captivating to all of us, and especially cryospheric scientists. Meet Alex Gardner, a cryospheric scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who's going to help break down what a classic West Coast North American glacier might look like, where high amounts of snow dump onto the mountains.
And at higher elevations, there's melt in summer, but not enough melt to get rid of all of that snow. And so that snow accumulates, it compacts, it turns into ice, and it starts to flow under its own weight, and it flows down the valleys. And as it flows down the valleys, it actually carves those valleys out and it makes them deeper. And so it creates these beautiful fjords where the ice flows down, snakes out and down to the ocean or to the lakes or further inland. And so that ice is flowing, it's moving.
Alex uses satellite data to study large-scale changes in glacial ice. But 2,000 miles to the north, Chris Larson from the University of Alaska Fairbanks spends a lot of time studying glaciers from the air. He's been flying over Alaskan mountain glaciers for many years, most recently on a NASA-funded mission called Operation Icebridge Alaska. He's absolutely enamored with his local rivers of ice.
And what do you love about mountain glaciers?
Well, they're in mountains, so they're really pretty.
You couldn't ask for a better way to experience Alaska on a large scale than to go flying around for campaign after campaign and look at all of the mountains in Alaska. Truly infinite. You just feel like you'll never see the end of them, and you don't want to either.
But Chris doesn't spend weeks away from home and family for the views. Chris and his colleagues at NASA want to answer some pretty big questions by learning more about Alaskan glaciers and how they tick.
You know, why does NASA care about these? Well, they actually disproportionately contribute a large amount to sea level rise.
In the long run, as the Earth warms due to climate change, the big ice sheets and mighty outlet glaciers of Greenland and Antarctica stand to contribute the most to sea level rise, simply because the vast majority of the planet's ice is stored there. But currently, it's the world's smaller mountain glaciers in comparatively warmer places like Alaska and Patagonia that are contributing about a third of all inputs to sea level rise, even though they account for only 1% of the world's ice.
Mostly due to them being dynamic. They have water at the bed, which allows them to slide fast, and they react quickly to climate change and have higher velocities than their polar counterparts.
Back at JPL, Alex uses satellite measurements of global ice and computer models to predict ultimately how much sea level rise we might see due to climate change. But in the case of mountain glaciers, we also care about the local impacts of disappearing ice.
When we think of changes in ice sheets, we typically think of just what is the consequence for sea level rise and the future evolution of the ice sheets. But glaciers in other regions, like high mountain Asia, Alaska, the European Alps, these are places where changes in runoff matters to stream flows. In places like high mountain Asia, you have a lot of glaciers that feed the streams that flow down to populated regions. And that runoff becomes significant for water resources, irrigation, and agriculture.
Both Alex and Chris are passionate about understanding how glaciers are changing and what it means for our planet's future. They'll continue to use tools like elevation maps from the ICESat-2 satellite and detailed airborne measurements to monitor changing ice.
By the end of the tunnel, you're about 100 feet underground, and you're surrounded by bones sticking out of the wall from the steppe bison and the mastodons. There's sticks that are 40,000 years old. There's grass that's still green, that's tens of thousands of years old.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at coastal water forecasts along the southeast coast, outer coastline, south coast. Northwest winds 20 knots on Saturday, seas 6 to 7 feet. West-northwest 15 knots on the north coast, seas around 6 feet. Lynn Canal, southerly winds 20 knots and variable winds 10 knots for the central, southern, and side waters. Moving on to the outlook for, let's see, Saturday or Sunday. Sunday, there we go. Small craft advisories there for the eastern North Gulf Coast. We got west-southwesterlies 20 to 25 knots. Otherwise, the central and north coast, south 20 knots, 15 knots there on the south coast, as well as Clarence Strait, south winds 15 knots, 3-foot seas. Stevens Passage, southeast at 15. Small craft advisories now for Lynn Canal. South winds increasing to 25 knots, seas building to about 5 feet. Cook Inlet, south to southwest winds tomorrow, 20 knots, seas 5 feet. Southeast 20 Kamishak Bay. Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast, winds will be southwest 15 knots, 4 to 5 foot seas. Light southeast breeze for Prince William Sound at 10 knots. And for Sunday, pick it up to 20 knots there for Prince William Sound, seas coming up to 4 feet. Small craft advisories there for the eastern North Gulf Coast, Middleton Island area, southeast 25, southwest 20 for the western North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, where winds will be southwest at 25 knots, Kamishak Bay, south at 25 knots, southern Cook Inlet, just under small craft level advisory values there, south 20 knots, seas 5 feet, southeast 15, northern Cook Inlet. Kodiak Island, southwest winds 20 knots. And from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, southeast winds 25 knots. Castle Cape to Cape Sarychev, southeast winds 25 knots, 8 to 10 foot seas, the entire stretch of the coastline there. Bristol Bay, small craft advisories, east winds 25 knots, and that extends all the way down to Cape Sarychev. And then for Sunday, Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds 25 knots, seas 10 feet. And that extends all the way up the east side of Kodiak Island. Shelikof Strait, go 8 foot in the seas, otherwise winds still southwest at 25. Bristol Bay, winds south at 20 knots. And for Unalaska Island tomorrow, southwest winds 25 knots, good for small craft advisories there. West at 20 knots, Unmak Island, Atka and Adak. Northwest 20 knots, Amchitka, Kiska and Shemya, north at 15. For Sunday, Shemya to Kiska, northwest 15, Amchitka Island north at 15, and variable to north winds, 10 to 15 knots there for the central Aleutians. Small craft advisories continue mainly for Unalaska Island, west-southwest 25, Unmak Island, west-northwest 15 to 20. Southwest coast, Kuskokwim Delta coastline, south of Nunivak Island, small craft advisories, east winds 25 knots. Small craft advisories, St. Lawrence Island, south winds 25 knots. And 15 knots out of the northeast for the Yukon Delta coast, and St. Matthew Island, northeast 20 for the Pribilofs. And for Sunday, Small craft advisories. St. Lawrence Island into the northern Bering Sea, north of 25 knots around St. Matthew Island. Yukon Delta coast, northeast 25. East 20 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. And St. Paul and St. George looking at northwest winds at 20. For the central eastern Arctic coast, north to northwest breeze 10 knots, but small craft advisories, western Arctic coast there, 25 knot winds. And then from Cape Beaufort to Wales, northeast 30 knots with seas as high as 12 feet. Those come down on Sunday, but still small craft advisories from Wales to Cape Thompson for north winds at 25. Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, northeast at 20, northeast 15 western Arctic coast, and east winds or west winds of 15 knots there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. Otherwise, north to northwest at 10 for the central coast. And for tonight, again, high pressure up there along the Arctic coast, so light winds, low clouds, and fog, dry conditions, and dry for the north slope as well. Brooks Range, and actually kind of south of the Brooks Range there, an area of showers and rain continue from Kotzebue eastward, Kobuk, Koyukuk Valley areas into the Yukon Flats, the eastern border, and then southward, mostly cloudy with showers on the diminishing side there for the eastern interior. Panhandle, periods of rain or showers north, chance of showers south, dry for Kodiak Island, southwest interior, southern Alaska. Rain spreads to the Alaska Peninsula. And tomorrow, that rain shifts up to Kodiak Island with the warm front, low pressure just north of the Alaska Peninsula. Widespread area of rain, Pribilofs to Atka, right up into the southwest interior, and a band of moisture keeps rain and showers going over the northern part of the state. Looks wet and cool for southern Alaska on Sunday, but dry and a little sunnier and drier, or less wind up.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.